2024 Maserati Grecale Trofeo. This is Maserati's flagship entry in the ever-competitive premium or ultra-luxury two-row SUV segment. This in the United States, primarily due to pricing, has one direct competitor, the Porsche Macan, a vehicle we are very familiar with. I'm going to say this right off the bat. If you think this is just a reskinned Alfa Romeo Stelvio like I did, I will tell you definitively this is not. Maserati is doing their best to distinguish themselves from their fairly negative reputation here in the US with this latest generation of Maserati products. They feel that customization is what distinguishes themselves versus the Mercedes, Audis, and BMWs of the world. So you can pick your own exterior colors, interior colors. You can make this feel like your own through trim pieces, but you are paying for it. You have three different trim levels for the Grecale. The four-cylinder, which starts in the very high 60s, low 70s, the BEV variant, and this Trofeo, which as tested is $127,000. So what do you need to know from an exterior and interior perspective? The exterior styling is polarizing. I think this looks like a Ford Puma on the front, but from the rear and the sides, it does look like a fairly luxurious feeling Maserati product. Interior usability. What Maserati will tell you, I do agree, is compared to the Porsche Macan, this has best-in-class cargo capacity due to its stretched wheelbase, a big trunk. With the rear seats up, you're looking at about 20 cubic feet of cargo capacity. More importantly, the second row is large enough for full-size adults. I can fit basically behind myself as a 6-footer, which you can't do in things like the Audi Q5 or Porsche Macan. You have good headroom, reasonable visibility, though these very, very large A-pillars do restrict some of your frontward view. The seats in this thing, at least in this Trofeo model, are pretty comfortable. You have good range of adjustment, they're heated and cooled, and you have a fairly decent seating position, though you definitely feel relatively high up in this vehicle. When it comes to overall fit and finish, most of the materials, leather, suede headliner, basic touch points feel all right, though there's this waft of Stellantis-ness in this cabin. A lot of the switchgear you're going to be familiar with if you've been in Jeep or Dodge or Alfa Romeo products, though I don't know how many Maserati buyers spend a lot of time in Jeeps, but it's there, and it's there in the software as well. So getting to that, you have a dual touchscreen layout in the center console area. The top screen is for infotainment. The bottom screen is for HVAC and your clock controls. Your drive mode controls are largely dictated by the steering wheel jog dial. However, you can also interact with them in the infotainment. The audio system in this car, their premium audio system is average. While there is a 3D EQ, it is not as good as what you find in the Porsche Burmester setup, but it is a very quiet cabin. I do like these giant aluminum paddles that are column mounted. Let's head in the shop and put this thing up in the lift. We're going to walk you through what this thing is technically. In the shop with the Maserati Grecale Trofeo. And if you're Italian, I apologize ahead of time for butchering your language, and I apologize for Mark, who's been calling this the Guanciale Trofeo. Now, we spent some time with David, the chief engineer, so let's walk through what this thing is and is not. They use far more simulation and quality gates than they used to. This Grecale is built in the Casino factory, the same factory that the Giulia and the Stelvio from Alfa Romeo are built in. However, this is on its own unique manufacturing line and Maserati's own version of the Giorgio architecture, which is a double wishbone front, multi-link rear, scalable platform. What they've done is they've lengthened it, as we've already talked about, and they've radically changed, or basically modernized, the electronic architecture of the platform. They moved from like 80-something modules to over 150. They moved from a CAN bus setup to an Ethernet setup. So you have more modules talking to one another much, much faster. It also has the latest protection when it comes to cybersecurity. However, from a dynamics perspective, they've also centralized their vehicle control module. So not only does it talk faster to all the individual modules, all the information goes to one place. This is using the steering logic, the brake-by-wire, the all-wheel drive, the drivetrain, the transmission, the dampers, the air springs, the torque vectoring by brake in the front, and the EDIF in the back, all come together to allow this vehicle to feel as alive as possible. Again, the engineer was telling me how they are trying to make this feel dynamic, not like a boring, regular luxury SUV. They are well aware that these things are replacing small, mid-sized sports sedans. Now, before we talk about the rest of the V9 stuff, let's talk about the drivetrain. 3 different options for the Grecale. The mild hybrid four-popper, the BEV vehicle, the battery electric vehicle, and this twin-turbo 90-degree V6. This is powered by Maserati's own Nettuno twin-turbo V6 that was first featured in the MC20. Development for this drivetrain started in 2015, and unlike their supercar engines in the past, Maserati did all of this in-house, the engineering, the manufacturing, the validation. So, what is unique about this 90-degree V6? Well, it's 3 core F1 derived technologies. You have port and direct injection, you have dual spark plugs, and most importantly, a pre-combustion chamber. Essentially, that chamber sits between the central spark plug and the primary combustion chamber. It allows them to pre-ignite and have a more efficient combustion process, which allows them either to focus on efficiency or power. Well, this sounds very complicated because it is. Know that most of this was done for emissions. That is the joy of the Euro emissions. All these manufacturers, despite their high specific output, have to get close to Lambda 1. This is a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 that makes over 500 horsepower in this application, and the MC20, it makes over 600. The primary differences between the supercar setup and this is a wet sump versus a dry sump, obviously packaging differences, lower G requirements, and a different set of turbos, and obviously a different intake and exhaust. If we ever get more time, or we ever get an MC20, we'll go on a deep dive on the Nettuno V6, but it is the heart of this car, and it does make this feel very, very special. Uses a ZF 8-speed like a lot of cars do, and they've tried to focus on the exhaust sound as well. That was one of the things David told me about. Well, yes, this is never going to sound like a V8. They want this to sound a little bit more warm, a little bit more characterful, something that a lot of twin-turbo V6s suffer with. Now, back to the suspension of the vehicle dynamics. They are trying to use the suspension along with the brake-by-wire and the steering changes to allow them a wide selection of drive modes. This thing is an SUV, so they needed to be able to kind of go off-road. So you have an off-road mode. You have a comfort mode. You have a normal GT mode, sport, and full Corsa. There's sport mode. And I will say there is a wide difference in how all these modes feel. And one of the things that David was telling me is the thing that allowed them to do all of this is they're heavily leaning into simulation. Talking about dynamics, let's start with the tires. The Trofeo Grecales get a Bridgestone Potenza Sport. Yes, I know we're sponsored by Bridgestone, but what I'm getting at is they worked with Bridgestone directly to figure out, A, how the bespoke tire was supposed to be for this Grecale, loads, NVH requirements, wear characteristics. Then Bridgestone sends them a mathematical tire model that they can work with when tuning all the various other subsystems. This gives them the validation ahead of time, so they have to make less changes when it comes to physical hardware. This streamlines and makes their engineering process far more efficient and honestly more sophisticated than it used to be. They tried to balance liveliness. This car, well, you probably shouldn't, will do a full power slide. It feels very, very nimble, wanting to get in and out of corners while also balancing ride compliance. This is not as soft as a Porsche Macan on air springs, but this is still pretty soft, all things considered. This doesn't have the poor ride issues of something like an X3M. So with all that said, let's go take this for a quick drive with Mark. We're in the Grecale. I need to figure out how to put on launch control, which I can't do right now because we're on a hill. Doesn't matter, I'm gonna brake torque it. God, dude.
Yeah.
All right.
This son of a bitch has so much character, like real character.
I'm going to say, well, I should expect this thing to be good for $127,000.
No, that's a totally different topic.
I am impressed by how good it is. I think as I talk to the Maserati engineers, Maserati has earned a very, let's call it, questionable reputation in the United States. With things like the Ghibli and the Levante.
They're buy here. That's a buy here, pay lot joke. Like people are buying these things for like 20,000. Not this car, but
yes.
They're getting them dirt cheap. They don't last. They're just, I don't know. It's got a weird brand reputation here.
They are trying to fix that with this generation of product that started with the MC20, and at least from a driving perspective, I have no idea what this thing is going to be like in 5 years.
Yeah, sure.
Or 3 years or 2 years.
Right.
But from a driving perspective, they've done a lot right with this. They set the Macan in its sights entirely. And I think Maserati knows that they are the underdog in this space, and they focused on what they could do well, which is drivetrain and some level of excitement and joy. I've not driven a base Grecale, but this Trofeo with this Neptuno engine with 500 whatever horsepower it makes is pretty fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a ton of power. The ZF8 speed, while it's not quite as sharp as the dual clutch in the Porsche, it sure does make a ton of power. It delivers a lot of power very, very easily. The all-wheel drive system has some level of rotation to it. It's very nimble. It's got, despite the fact that we're in incredibly cold weather on summer tires, it's got a good level of grip. The front rotates when you ask it to. It's very, very entertaining.
You mean the back rotates when you...
Yeah, sorry, the back rotates.
I've never seen the... I'd like to see the front rotate around.
We can show right now when I roll this thing on the farm roads.
I love how responsive, and I noticed this driving it too, I love how responsive the first, second, and third gear shifts are. The spacing of the gears are so... They're so close together, and it creates a bigger sensor.
Oh
That's how you take it when you're in an Equinox. Yep.
Yeah, they're really tightly spaced.
Yeah, and the shift speed, and not only that, the exhaust, farting that you're getting from it, it really does. For an SUV, this definitely delivers a different experience. Now the question becomes, is this delivering more than like an X3M?
Or a Macan,
or
really.
a Macan, which is really what you're going for in this space in terms of a performance SUV in our country.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
All right. So while this person continues to drive in the oncoming lane of traffic for some reason, what they are trying to do, as I talked about in the shop, is unlike an X3M, the level of exclusivity, the fact that you can totally customize one of these things to the max, is how they're trying to deliver on some level of luxury.
Okay.
I think from a ride quality perspective, we are in the firmest mode right now.
Yeah.
And when you put it back into comfort, as I'm about to do, and you tell the exhaust to shut up, and you put back on all the traction control, and it puts the ZF8 speed in the most dim-witted, slowest shifting, old man mode, it does the luxury car thing pretty well. It's very quiet on the highway. It rides on the firmer side. It's on 21s, but it rides nowhere as bad as an X3M.
Yeah.
I think it delivers in its mission of being sort of a substitute sports sedan. Where it doesn't do as well as the Porsche specifically is the interior space. It's more usable than the Porsche. It's much bigger.
Yeah.
But maybe because you and I have been in so many Stellantis products,
It's when I drove this the first time, and I knew nothing about it. I drove it before you talked to the engineers. I thought this feels very much like an Alfa Tonale, or it drove more like a Stelvio. And the Stelvio is a great driving SUV. So that was my question, and I know you talked about it in the shop. It has a lot of the same character of those cars, or more so the Stelvio, but this has like amped up quite a bit.
Yes.
And I think it caught me off guard of how much I actually like driving it. I just couldn't match the price tag of $120,000 with this interior space. And again, this is way better. Like comparing to the Levante, let's just go back to that. From driving the Levante to this,
or Ghibli.
Yeah, this is you can tell this is a massive improvement in cohesion, inside, outside, driving character, engine, transmission performance. It does everything really well. It just, man, this is going to be, if I told somebody like, hey, you should consider this over an X3M
or Macan.
I think people would just be like, what are you high?
Yeah.
It's just going to be really hard in this market.
It's an uphill battle. I think if you're gonna buy this thing, or really, if you're gonna lease this thing here in the US, you have to be tired of Porsche.
Yes.
That's really it. You have to be tired of the Porsche, or you can't accept the space of Porsche, or you're looking for something with more character.
Yeah.
Do I think this is better than a Macan? As a luxury car, going in a straight line as we're doing right now, not really. I think the Macan still rides better.
Yeah, it has more ride refinement.
Yes, I think the interior space feels like a more expensive price point, particularly if you're dolling one up to over 120 grand, which you can do in a Macan.
Yeah.
But I think when you're driving both cars like an absolute monkey, this is more entertaining because of the Nettuno engine.
Yeah.
The 90-degree V6 in this car has a lot of character, and the gears are spaced very, very tightly. And it's got a better, not necessarily better, but it has a bigger breadth of personalities. Like in comfort mode, this is straight up an old man car.
Yeah.
And then when you put this in Corsa, the track or sport plus mode that this car has, it's straight up firm. It wants to rotate everywhere. It's much better than I think I thought it was going to be, and it's not a bad car. You just have to love Maserati.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave this before you get to the final thoughts, Jack. What I would say is in the internal combustion era of SUVs, where there's a million SUVs, this delivers on two things that you absolutely have to get right, and the engine and transmission performance here is where this separates itself, because otherwise, you can buy anything, and I think they did this so good, and it's so engaging and fun that that's why I would say they did a really great job with it.
So with that, Mark, let's head on the final thoughts, sir. Final thoughts on the Maserati Grecale. First off, huge thanks to our Maserati reps and the Maserati engineers who spent so much time with me, and our title sponsor, Bridgestone, who again provide us a lot of technical information. So if you're looking for a set of tires for your own vehicle, and because we're heading into winter, please check out their Potenza All Seasons or their Blizzak line. Again, we are doing a technical deep dive in the future on tires. We're going to walk you through how the engineering changes based upon the category of tire you get and what goes into actually manufacturing a tire. Now, what about the car? Well, I'm going to say this. I am pleasantly surprised by how good this thing is. I did not have the highest of expectations. The Levante, their first SUV, was a bit disappointing, if I'm going to be honest. This isn't. If you are looking for a very dynamic feeling premium SUV that does have a high level of badge prestige, this has it. This drivetrain, the Nettuno V6, has a lot of character. The 8-speed ZF, while it might not be as fast as the dual clutch that's in a Macan, that combo makes this thing feel more alive than that vehicle. Dynamically, it's more fun. While it may not be as competent, it wants to get in and out of corners, it wants to get loose. It is a very entertaining SUV, and if you put it into GT or Comfort, it's pretty comfortable. It really is a soft, compliant, boaty SUV when it needs to be, and that's what impresses me. The interior space is arguably more usable than what you find in a Porsche Macan as well. It's a better size. If you need to put full-size adults in the back or child seats, you can do that better than you can in a Macan. The con is it's not a Porsche, which means this thing depreciates like a stone. Some of the interior stuff is not as nice as you get in the Porsche. The Macan feels like a more premium space, particularly when you're playing in the north $100,000 price point for Porsche products. And that becomes the uphill battle that Maserati is going to have to deal with. But if you're sick of Porsches and you can get one of these for a decent lease, this is a very entertaining two-row SUV. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.
Hechizo que tenía sobre mí.